Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Extraordinarily Ordinary. Our guest today is Mr. Lai Chee Seng. Chee Seng is a writer, content strategist, and branding advocate who has over 20 years of experience. He has helped numerous businesses, C-suites, and senior government leaders establish their market authority and thought leadership. His original thought leadership content has received praise from industry experts around the world. Chee Seng takes a 360 degrees approach to his communications, drawing from his professional experience, which includes PR, publishing, digital, and advertising and marketing, as well as his life experience as an NLP practitioner, trainer, teacher, and community leader. As we know, mental health is not really a popular subject. As a mental health advocate myself, I'm always continuing to find ways on how best to get my message across to the people that I'm advocating to. The topic is even still considered as taboo in many communities. From the perspective of a writer and a branding expert, why do you think mental health advocacy is not gaining as much attention as it should?
I think mental health is getting a lot of traction now, actually, compared to like just a few years ago. I think there are many spokespersons right now, but also I think there is we have to understand the market a bit, right? So coming from a branding background, so I think especially in the Asian context, it's very man-led kind of society, and the expectations of men is like just suck it up, deal with it, and move on, right? And well, I'm not saying it's wrong. That there is value in that to people really, taking leadership and moving forward, for things to get done and get solved. But I think there has to be a balance as well. And I think if I read society correctly, I think a lot of it comes from that. Where when people talk about mental health, you need to notice what's happening to you emotionally, mentally, and you need to take steps to take care of yourself. And there is this very large proportion of the community that says, well, you got to suck it up. And our parents did it, and I myself, to a certain extent, I subscribe to this way of thinking, right? So because I guess I'm old enough. But I think yeah, I come to realize that there needs to be a balance. There really does need to be a balance. I was talking to someone, I think there was sometime in April or May. And that person is a trained medical person. She said she was talking to a friend of hers, and she said he was displaying early signs of depression because of the lockdowns.
Yeah.
And she just told me the symptoms. He didn't have any motivation to do anything. Slept late at night, woke up in the morning, and just very listless. And I'm thinking, wow, that's me.
Yes.
Right. And I didn't have a word for it. I knew what I felt. I'm the more introspective type, right? So I knew what I was feeling at the time. I knew that this wasn't the answer. I knew that I needed to focus on more positive things. But I didn't have a word for it until that person said that, oh, these are early signs of mild depression. Then that's when I realized, hey, yeah, I mean, we don't have words for it, and sometimes we take it for granted. I consider myself very lucky because I realized what was happening to me, and I made a decision that, hey, look, I can't keep focusing on the anxiety. I can't keep focusing on the fear. I need to focus on the positives and look for the positives. But that was me being a very introspective person. What about other people, I think, who are out there, who are maybe not so introspective or really too busy with their life to actually sit down and think what is going on in their mental state, emotional state?
Too busy trying to survive the pandemic and the economic recession things, right?
That's right. So sometimes people just don't have that nature to actually sit down and introspect what's going on. Right. So yeah, I think it is very important. And part of the pushback is the deal with it kind of culture that we have.
So from a content writer point of view, and from the perspective of branding, what strategies do you feel mental health advocates like me should implement to make our campaign more effective and engaging?
From a branding and writing point of view, we always try to start from storytelling. Right? Like just now I told you a story of my own experience, and immediately it's like, yeah, that makes sense. So I mean, for you are a mental health advocate, you know all this, but whenever I tell that story to people, it's like, yeah, I get it. You know, so I think that makes it very relatable. You know, sometimes we talk about things, it can be too technical and people just can't relate it. But if we can make it relatable by illustrating it with a story, especially with a true story, right? And then people will start to, I can identify with that. You know, I understand what you're talking about. Oh, there's a word for it now, right? Like for me, I can identify with that story. Oh, now there's a word for it. It's called mild depression. It's a mental health issue, right? So these are the things you can do about it. I think storytelling is one of the best ways, and not just for mental health, but actually for any issue, right? If you're able to be effective in your storytelling, especially if the storytelling is authentic. I personally prefer it to be authentic, because honestly, sometimes when you create a story, sometimes it feels very forced.
Yes.
Right? So I'd rather make it a real story, because the advantage is it becomes something that people can truly empathize with. Right? It happened to a real person, it's a real situation. And if I were your friend, you know, I would feel like this for you, right? Then that's where you get the empathy for the issue.
This is also why I started my YouTube series, the Extraordinarily Ordinary, because I wanted to tell real stories of real people who are experiencing mental health issues themselves. But that is only one part of it. Mental health advocacy also include raising awareness, dispersal of information, and public education. However, when we write about these things, the technical part of mental illness, mental health issues, things tend to get a bit dry and boring. So is there any way, any advice that you can give us, or any copywriting techniques that can make our content, the factual content, more engaging?
There's a certain format to storytelling that's very simple. Human beings have been telling stories for thousands of years. We are sort of even genetically tuned to respond to this structure, because it's been culture all around the world, right? So when you structure your story in this way, you are not just telling a story, you are actually making a connection at a cultural, genetic level where people are tuned to respond, right? So let me give you an example. So the structure is like this. You have the big idea, the theme of the story, and then you start with the premise. Once there was something, and then everything was fine until this happened, and because of that, something else, because of that, something else, and finally something else, and then you come back to the big idea, the theme. So you have to start from somewhere. Once there was, everything was fine until this happened. So there has to be a trigger that starts you on a journey, and the journey must have a conclusion. So that is the basic structure of a story. So it works for, let's say, for example, Walt Disney, Snow White, right? So once there was a beautiful girl, everything was fine, you know, and the whole realm acknowledged her as a beautiful lady inside and out, until the Wicked Witch discovered that, as Wicked Stepmother discovered that, oh, she is not the Wicked Stepmother was not the most beautiful after all, and because of that, she wanted Snow White killed, right? And because of that, the woodsman took Snow White to the jungle, forest, and had pity on her and let her go. And because of that, Snow White ended up with the 7 dwarfs. And because of that, you know, the Wicked Witch the Wicked Stepmother came and looked for her and poisoned her with an apple. And because of that, she fell into a coma and was discovered by the prince, gave her a kiss, and you know, and so on and so on and so on, until finally the Wicked Stepmother was defeated and good triumphs over evil, right? So you start with the big idea that Snow White is the good personification. You end with the big idea that Snow White triumphs because good triumphs over evil. If you want to put it down to a mental health content, so what's the big idea? What's the story you want to tell? What's the theme you want to tell? Right? And I think it gets technical when people say that, oh, I want to talk about depression, for example.
Yes.
So once, and then you start with depression and you end with depression. And what does the audience feel? Do I want to hear about depression? Audiences do not want to hear about depression because why? It's depressing. What audiences want to hear about is triumph. How did you overcome depression? Right? Or if you didn't overcome depression, how did you feel better? Or if you didn't feel better, what can you appreciate that people have supported you? Some kind of positive thing to it. So it cannot be about the topic itself, or let's say, for example, anxiety. So yes, we want to talk about anxiety, but the big idea cannot start about anxiety. I was anxious, and the end with I was anxious. If there's a very nice, interesting, crazy story in between, fine, then it becomes like interesting, like thriller or drama or sometimes maybe even comedy. If that is the only story we're talking about, is about anxiety, then what's the solution? People want happy endings. So if you want to talk about anxiety, depression, yeah, these are important issues, but people want to see what is the triumph, what is the win. If there is no win, what can I do, the audience, to contribute to the win?
Let me give you an example. Let's say if I want to talk about the symptoms of depression, instead of making it all technical and medical, the best way to get my message across is also to list down the steps we can take to reduce the possibilities of getting the symptoms. Is that it?
Yeah. Let's think back just now how I told the story about my mild depression, right?
Yeah.
So big idea is I had depression, but I found out something about it. That's the big idea, right? Once it was me, happily going along, everything was fine until the lockdown happened.
Yes. Okay.
Right? The lockdown happened, and then because of that, I found myself, losing, feeling a lot of anxiety about the future. I was wondering what's going to happen. I didn't have much savings in my life. my bank, and I wasn't sure how we were going to live. I might go bankrupt in about 6 months, and all this kind of stuff. Because of that, I started to lose motivation. I didn't have any direction in my life. I didn't want to sleep. I stayed up very late. And when I did sleep, I didn't want to wake up. And then I realized people are still making money. People are still taking advantage of opportunities. Which means there are still opportunities out there. And I realized that I can't be sitting here feeling anxious, because it's just going to go downhill. So I better look for what is positive, what can be positive. And that's when I joined a COVID-19 communications group. We try to educate people about COVID-19. And that's when I joined a group to help people who are really, really in distress because they are daily wage earners. That's when I decided, okay, let's look at what's positive. Don't look at the bad news, look at the good news. And that's when I realized there were a lot of good things that was happening. There were people who pulled together to 3D print technologies for the frontliners and things like that. Fascinating stories. And then I started on my personal branding journey in a new direction, and this really set my career in a new direction, and opportunities really opened up. Right? So I'm not saying I got better from the depression or I overcame depression, but at least people who are in my situation, who almost slipped into depression, right, was able to turn it around. Very, very fortunately, I must say. Right? So you see the story that goes, how did I turn it around? I didn't list down the things of do. I shared the story of what I actually did. I didn't tell you what were the symptoms of depression as a clinical list. I just shared with you how I felt, which were, are typical depression symptoms. Every time when I told this story, people will be like, wow, yeah, I can so identify with this. Wow, I'm so inspired, wow, that's such an inspirational story. I don't set out to be inspirational, but this format is so embedded in me that, whenever I tell something, it just comes out like this, right? So it always gets a reaction. So the thing is, don't be clinical about it, don't be technical about it. Make it human, because these mental health issues are all about humans. It happens to humans. Human beings need to respond, right? Whether it's happening to you or whether you're a friend or a loved one who is trying to support them. It's not a story about symptoms. It's a story about people, how people display these symptoms and how people can help people who have these symptoms. Right, then I think it's much more relatable.
So if I can sum that up, it means that even though we want to list down the symptoms, we should integrate it into the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, as opposed to like, these are the symptoms of depression that you should be aware of.
Yeah, that's right. So we want to have a conversation with audiences. How do conversations go? I tell you a story. Right? If you're curious, if you're interested, you want to find out more, then I'll tell you some more. I answer the questions that you are asking. I don't deliver you the content and then wonder why you're not asking questions.
Okay, how about this method? Because I've seen several websites or mental health advocates who do this. They start with a story, and the symptoms are integrated within the story, but at the end of the story they put a caption there and say that if you would like to find out more about the symptoms of depression, click on this link, and that link is like you said, the 20 symptoms of depression. So
yeah, that's fine.
That works too, right?
That's right. So the effective technique is to actually build the story. So once you have the story, then you can continue the conversation. Yeah, that's I think the important thing. So this is normally used for presentations, but I find it's really good for any kind of communication. There are 4 questions basically in any kind of communication we need to answer: the why, the what, the how, and the what if. The first question we always answer is why, because for every single human being in the world, if you tell me something, I want to know why should I care. No human being will say, if you tell me something that's, oh yes, wow. No human being will have a totally open heart whenever you tell me anything. Give me. No, we all have a mental filter, and we all have our own values. We all have our own thinking. Everything that comes to us, every information, every communication that comes to us, it has to pass through this filter first. And so the first question to answer for the audience is, why should I care? And this is something you cannot tell. You cannot tell the audience you should care, because it's always we have to understand our audience. What are our audience priorities? What are our audience concerns? What are our audience motivations? What are our audience triggers? So once we understand our audience, then we can understand their own why. So for example, just now we started the conversation by asking, why mental health is not really such a popular topic being discussed, right? My theory is the why of the audience is, suck it up, deal with it. Our parents dealt with worse things. How did our forefathers come from semi-slave conditions to be successful people today, right? Suck it up. Then you have to answer that why. Why a person who has that kind of mental filter need to care about this. Once you can understand the why, and once you are able to effectively answer the why, then people will say the next question, okay, now that I'm a little bit interested, tell me what it's about, right? So this is a mental conversation, right? Just now I said it's a conversation with our audience. Now this is where you need to very quickly give a snapshot what it's about, because people have not fully committed to hearing your message. Mentally, they are still, okay, tentatively, sounds interesting what you told me, so let's see what it's about. So here is where it's very quickly you need to give a very brief summary of what it's about, and it has to be very closely attached to the why. You cannot attract with the why and then something else. So if they are still interested after that, then they want to know, okay, how does this work? And that's where you can give details. You can give your list and whatever. So that's why those websites that you mentioned, yeah, they have a story, and then to find out more, and then they give you the technical stuff. That's how it works, right? They give you a story. If you're interested in the story, okay, the story headline or whatever, if you're interested to read until the end, that's the what. And if you're interested to find out more, click here, and then you go to the how. And then once the how you explain in detail, and then we have to close it off with the what if. What if is aspirational. What's your next step? Do you need to change your thinking? Do you need to take a certain kind of action, make a donation, volunteer, look out for your friends who have these symptoms? What is it? What can you, the audience, do now that you know the why, what, and how, all the issues involved? What can you, the audience, do for yourself, for your loved ones, to make this world a better place? This is a very, very effective format to use.
That's very interesting, because I think so far the websites that have succeeded in advocating for mental health, they follow this format.
Yeah. So if you think about it, this one is actually very closely related to the story structure that I showed just now, right?
Yeah.
So the big idea is the why. You project the big idea, and if people buy into this big idea, you can start in the story. So that's the what and the how. The what is the beginning of the story, where you give a summary, and then the how is the details of the story, and then the conclusion is, well, the big theme again. But if you want to take it further, then yeah, what if, what is the moving forward for the audiences?
If we look at mental health advocacy as a form of advertising to encourage people to seek professional help as early as they possibly can, how do we do that without sounding too preachy or constipated?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to the storytelling and the format. We have to understand what is the why of the people who are suffering from mental health issues. So if you ask me, I think a very big why people are not keen to get help, there is a stigma to seeing a psychiatrist or psychologist or a counselor. And this one, I think, goes back to the deal with it kind of culture unless you can answer that why effectively, you won't even get to the what and how. The what and how is the one that you will tell people, okay, what are the benefits of actually going to get help, how to get help, and what will happen to you, the benefits that you get after you get help, right? Without going through the why, that's the gate. Without going through that why, you won't get to the rest of it. So I think whoever you are speaking to, you need to understand the audience segment. You can't speak to an audience segment of people who are having mental health issues. You can speak to single mothers who are having anxieties with their children. You can speak to middle-aged professionals who are feeling highly stressed in their jobs. You can speak to elderly folks who are feeling lonely because they are not in touch with their children. We call this audience segmentation. If you know your audience, then you can answer the question. So if you know, let's say for example, depressed elderly people, then you know what kind of stories to tell them. You know what kind of questions they want answered. If you're talking about everybody who has mental health, who is that? What are their issues? If you don't know that, then you can't answer their why. Especially today, with social media, everybody expects a personalized message, a personalized tone. A general broadcast does not work anymore.
For example, for me, for every post that I put out, I have to know my target readers.
Yeah, I don't believe everybody can target everybody. So, you can't target children and then teenagers and then early adults and all the way up to, nobody, I don't think anybody has that capacity to communicate with every strata of society, right? So you need to identify your own niche that you can effectively speak to and focus on that first. And the advantage is, if you have become very good at that, you can actually expand rather than expand and try and cover everybody and not be good at anything.
So we have almost come to the end of the show. Before we go, is there any tips that you would like to give to up-and-coming mental health advocates or people who are thinking about starting their own advocacy but have no idea or courage to do it?
If you ask me about courage, it's very cliche, but I would have to say just do it.
Yeah.
Nothing starts without starting, right? In fact, yesterday I was just coaching somebody on LinkedIn who asked me, they wanted some advice how to tidy up their profile and start posting. I didn't give him any advice. I just wanted to help him realize where he was coming from. So I just started asking him a whole list of questions, because I want to get down to the why, right? When you get down to the why, whether personally, whether it's your communication campaign, whether it's a post or whatever, once you get down to your why, you understand your motivations, you understand your directions, you understand the reason, the purpose why you're doing this, then you actually become unstoppable. If you know your true purpose and it's truly aligned to you, and if you are and you have questioned yourself down to the level where you got the answer, and you know you got the answer, and you know you got the answer because there's this, you can feel the fire burning in you. It excites you without hesitation, right? Sometimes we are not even aware. Yeah, this is really exciting, but that's because there's something underneath that as well. But if you question yourself down to the point where it excites you without hesitation, without qualification of if, maybe, but, what if something else happens, if it comes down to the point where you do not have any of these other questions, then that's your real purpose. When you discover that, nothing stops you. Just even if there are challenges, you will find ways to overcome the challenge.
I think even for us mental health advocates, the way we do it is also similar to how we advocate, how we tell our stories. Like we need to figure out why we're doing it.
Yeah.
Once we get the why, then we know what we're going to do, and from then we know how we're going to do it, and after that we can figure out the what ifs, the benefits that we can give out to the public.
Exactly. Right? So as Simon Sinek says, it's always start from the why.
So number one is the why. Figure out why you want to do it, then the rest will follow. And I think
if you ask me, a big part of it is actually learning how to be really honest with ourselves first, because sometimes we have a lot of mixed motivations, and then we pick one that sounds the nicest. I'm sharing this because I've gone through this as well, right? So a lot of mixed motivations, but this one sounds like the most acceptable if I tell it to other people, right? So let's stick with this. But then I've got so many other motivations beneath that, so it's just, I go here, but I've got some other stuff here. I go here, I've got some other stuff there. So it's very difficult to move forward, right? But once you have that authentic why, really, you're unstoppable.
Thank you, Chee Seng, for doing this interview with me. I'm sure our audience will benefit from what we've discussed about today. As a mental health advocate myself, I've learned how to improve on my advocacy to reach my target audience or target readers.
Yeah.
Okay, Chee Seng, thank you so much. And to our audience, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you all in my next episode. Bye.
Bye.
Digital and express. Should I just call you Chee Seng or?
Yeah, please call me Chee Seng. I don't feel old enough to be called Mr. yet.